saw that how we saw that how Parikshit Maharaj he asked Shukdev Goswami that uh, that in spite of doing so much for atonements, performing so many acts, one is forced to commit sins again and again. So what is the value of such atonement? So that is the question Parikshit Maharaj is asking, and he says that considering this process of repeated sinning and atoning, it is useless, because even though one is very alert, so that they don't commit any sinful act, they still fall down and are victimized by sinful life again. And he gives an example of a bathing of an elephant, like how an elephant, he takes a full bath and then throws himself in the dust over its head and body as soon as it returns to the land. And then Shukadev Goswami mentions that even though one may superficially seem pious, he will undoubtedly be prone to act impiously. Therefore, real atonement is enlightenment in perfect knowledge, by which one understands the supreme absolute truth. And he emphasizes on devotional service of the Lord. He mentions that there are different processes of following rules and regulations and how one can go for the path of atonement before giving up this body, so that they may neutralize all their sinful actions. But still, that is not very intelligent, and it is done in the mode of ignorance, in the mode of darkness. And then he says, he mentions here about celibacy, speaking truth, being non-violent, giving charity, being clean, controlling the mind. But he mentions that these sins are like the dried leaves of creepers beneath a bamboo tree. That even though you perform acts to, make your sinful actions, like neutralize them or go for atonement, but still the seeds, the dried leaves of those sinful tendencies, they are still there beneath as the roots beneath the ground. And he gives the example of this bamboo tree. And he mentions that only by unalloyed devotional service to Krishna can uproot the weeds of sinful actions, with no possibility that they will revive. And then he gives this pastime that, now my dear king, hear this pastime which was spoken by great sages. And when we read this, the pastime of Ajamil, who was very pious, a Brahmana who was well trained by his parents, and he used to do deity worship and follow devotional service, everything. And one day he happened to went to the forest to collect flowers as his father asked him, and he sees one low-class prostitute woman engaged with a low-class man, and he gets very agitated. And even though he tries to, just take away his mind from that scene, but still he keeps on, pondering over that again and again. And eventually he marries the prostitute. He gives up his family. He gives up his beautiful wife, a chaste, loyal woman, and he starts engaging into acts like cheating and trying to, cheat people, steal from them, just to make sure that he satisfy the the prostitute, and in return he can get the sense enjoyment from her. And eventually he begets 10 sons, and the youngest one he names Narayana, because Krishna has a super soul. He somehow gave him the intelligence, seeing the past and future of this Brahmana. He gave him the intelligence to name his son Narayana. And soon his all the sinful actions, they come to an end, and the Yamdutas come, the horrifying features. With horrifying features, these three Yamdutas, they come, and fierce, twisted faces, hair standing erect on their bodies. So quite a graphic description being given. So they came and they start ripping out his soul from his body, and he cries out loud, because he was so close to his youngest son. He used to eat with him and just do every activity with him. So he chants his name, Narayana, Narayana, and he realizes that, he's just merely a small child. And soon, when he realizes that, he thinks of his deity that he used to worship, the Lord Narayana. And when he chants in anxiety, without any offense, the Vishnu Dutas, they come. They immediately come, sent by the Lord Vishnu, and they start questioning these Yamdutas that what are you doing? Where are you taking him? And these Yamdutas, they get very shocked that what is happening? We are just doing our job. Who are you guys? And this is how they go to and fro. And the Vishnu Dutas ask, okay, you are the servants of Yamraj, then tell us about religion and irreligion. And then the conversation between the Yam Dutas and Vishnu Dutas, it starts. And that's what we were reading last time also. And one thing that I want to mention here, that the Yamdutas mention that, oh, inhabitants of Vaikuntha, you are sinless, but those within this material world are all karmis, whether acting piously or impiously. Both kinds of action are possible for them because they are contaminated by the three modes of nature and must act accordingly. One who has accepted a material body cannot be inactive, and sinful action is inevitable for one acting under the modes of material nature. Therefore, all the living entities within this material world are punishable. So these Yamdutas, they start explaining the laws of nature and how one is punished and how a person being in this material world is controlled by the three modes of nature, the ropes of the material energy, and how their future life, their past life, and their present life is determined based on that. So last time we finished till verse text 52, and we'll start reading from text 53 just to pick it up from the last time. So we, for the sake of the time, we will skip the reading of the Sanskrit verses and just go with the translation. And if you really want to read the Sanskrit verses, feel free to do that as well. But just to keep time in mind. So we'll start now. I'll just say prayers for everyone. And then in the order of the list, I think Jitendra Prabhu is first, then Lekha Mataji, then Sundari Sakhi Mataji, and then Nupur. We can in the sequence start reading and sharing our own thoughts. So I'll just say prayer for everyone. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरन्दस्य ज्ञानञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरोन्मिलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरुवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले स्वयं रूपा कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकं। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतापदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपां साग्रजातां सागना रघुनाथान् पितां तां सजीवां साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्री राधा कृष्णपदान् सहगना ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च। हे कृष्णा करुणा सिंधु दीनबंधु जगतपते गोपेशा गोपिका कांता राधा कांता नमोस्तुते। तप्त कांचना गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिय। वञ्चाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। नमो विष्णुपदाय कृष्णपृष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिनिति नामिने। नमस्ते सरस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यादेशतारिणे। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंदा। हरे कृष्ण 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 हरे हरे, हरे राम 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 हरे हरे। So we can start with the text 53. Jiten Prabhu, would you like to go?
Sure.
Thank you,
So
Prabhu.
text 53, I'll read Sanskrit for this one because this is an important verse. It is quoted very often, and it's one of, we'll see when we read the translation. Nahi kaschit kshanam api jatu tishthate akarma krit karyate ya avashah karma gunai swabha vikair balat. Translation: not a single living entity can remain unengaged even for a moment. One must act by his natural tendency according to the three modes of material nature, because this natural tendency forcibly makes him work in a particular way. Purport: the Swabhavika, or one's natural tendency, is the most important factor in action. One's natural tendency is to serve, because a living entity is an eternal servant of God. The living entity wants to serve, but because of his forgetfulness of his relationship with the Supreme Lord, he serves under the modes of material nature and manufactures various modes of service, such as socialism, humanitarianism, and altruism. However, one should be enlightened in the tenets of Bhagavad Gita and accept the instruction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead that one give up all tendencies, all natural tendencies for material service under different names and take to the service of the Lord. One's original natural tendency is to act in Krishna consciousness because one's real nature is spiritual. The duty of a human being is to understand that he is essentially spirit. He must abide by the spiritual tendency and not be carried away by material tendencies. Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur has therefore sung, my dear brothers, you are being carried away by the waves of material energy and are suffering in many miserable conditions. Sometimes you're drowning in the waves of material nature, and sometimes you're tossed like a swimmer struggling in the ocean. As confirmed by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this tendency to be battered by the waves of Maya can be changed to one's original natural tendency, which is spiritual, when the living entity comes to understand that he is eternally Krishnadas, a servant of God, Krishna. Krishnadara, Krishnadas ei Vishwas, Karlet Ara Dukhanai. If instead of serving Maya under different names, one turns his service attitude towards the Supreme Lord, he is then safe and there is no more difficulty. If one returns to his original natural tendency in the human form of life, by understanding the perfect knowledge given by Krishna himself in the Vedic literatures, one's life is successful.
Mm, yeah, any thoughts, Prabhuji? Want to share?
Yeah, this verse is directly an attack uh, to attack on this class of spiritualists who say that we need to become inactive completely, still the mind completely, and things like that. So here it is, this verse says that not a single living entity can remain unengaged. So there is no question of becoming completely inactive, which is the state of nirvana defined by some, right? So this is that is one thing, and Prabhupada writes very nicely that the dharma of the soul is to serve. So we've all heard this definition, right, of
Mm,
dharma, that it is something that cannot be separated from us, from the thing that it is ascribed to. For instance, sweetness is a dharma of sugar and things like that, right? So similarly, the dharma of the soul is to serve. And this serving tendency, though, it is originally meant for, it is something like this. We are limited, and when we direct our service attitude towards something limited, then it's temporary, it's all temporary, right? But
mm,
even though we are limited, if we direct our service attitude towards the unlimited, who is Krishna, then there can be an eternal exchange of love, right? Because even though we are limited, the grace that comes upon us, uh, the source of that grace is unlimited, right? So there is an constant exchange of rasa in that stage. And yeah, the main swarupa, or the main dharma of the living entity is to serve Krishna. Jivera swarupa hai Krishna nityadas. And then even it is said in the Bhagavatam elsewhere that Mukti also, higher mukti means in India, people usually talk about abhi mujhe mukt hona hai and things like that, right?
Hmm.
The idea is that there is a lot of misery in life and one wants to become free from that misery, right? And that's how mukti is seen. But there is this verse which says, Mukti hitvan yatha rupam swarupena vyavasthiti. So, mukti in the truest sense is actually to be situated in one's swarupa, in one's constitutional position. And that constitutional position is Jivera Swarupa hai Krishna Nityadas, like
Hmm.
that. And yeah, yeah, we try to engage our serving tendency and loving tendency in this material world because of our forgetfulness of the love that we have for Krishna. So we have to engage in the process of bhakti and uncover that potential within us to love and serve Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. That was very elaborate and very clear. Anyone, if someone wants to share, they can raise their hands, or we can move to the next verse. Lekha Mataji, would you like to go next?
Sure, Prabhu. So I'll read the translation directly.
Sure.
The fruit of activities a living being performs, whether pious or impious, are the unseen cause for the fulfillment of his desires. This unseen cause is the root for the living entity's different bodies. Because of his intense desire, the living entity takes birth in a particular family and receives a body which is either like that of his mother or like that of his father. The gross and subtle bodies are created according to his desire. Purport: the gross body is a product of the subtle body. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 8.6, Yam yam vapi smaram bhavam tyakteyante kalevaram tam tam evaiti kaunteya sada tad bhava bhavitaha. Whatever state of being one remembers when he quits his body, that state he will attain without fail. The atmosphere of the subtle body at the time of death is created by the activities of the gross body. Thus, the gross body acting during one's lifetime and the subtle body acts at the time of death. The subtle body, which is called linga, the body of desire, is the background for the development of a particular type of gross body, which is either like that of one's mother or like that of one's father. According to the Rig Veda, if at the time of sex the secretions of the mother are more profuse than those of the father, the child will receive a female body. And if the secretions of the father are more profuse than those of the mother, the child will receive a male body. These are the subtle laws of nature which act according to the desire of the living entity. If a human being is taught to change his subtle body by developing a consciousness of Krishna, at the time of death, the subtle body will create a gross body in which he will be a devotee of Krishna. Or if he's still more perfect, he will not take another material body but will immediately get a spiritual body and thus return home back to Godhead. This is the process of the transmigration of the soul. Therefore, instead of trying to unite human society through paths for sense gratification that can never be achieved, it is clearly desirable to teach people how to become Krishna conscious and return home back to Godhead. This is true now and indeed at any time.
Um, can I share something?
Yes, Prabhu. It's very actually in the first half of the paragraph. So I mean, Prabhupada has definitely made his point very clear, even in the previous purport as well as in this purport, about how all these like social activities that we think is based off of humanitarian causes, but we really don't know where the end result is or how what are the things that's running in the background. So it sounds like if we do something that's dovetailed towards Krishna consciousness, it's probably a better way of actually doing some service and making sure that that service is actually being used as a service for the right reasons and for the right causes. That was like that's very clear from both these purposes that Prabhupada is saying. And in the first half of the the third line, I don't think I can annotate. Um, so thus the gross body acts during one's lifetime. That statement really caught my eye because this happens in India too. It's like usually spirituality is seen as a some as an old age thing, like someone who's retired can then start getting into spirituality. And yeah, like chanting is later, like after you're 60 you can get into God. Until then, like enjoy life. It's like at that time, if you don't practice it early enough, you're not going to suddenly change your whole life and get it become all spiritual. It's very hard. It's very hard to, because we have been developing certain kind of impressions right now, and then suddenly if I have to change it when I'm like 60, it's going to be hard. So it's so this line somehow just caught my eye, and I think it means that we have to keep our sadhana consistent, our perspective about life very consistent in terms of like gaining spiritual realization. That was something that I wanted to share.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, being an early bird in devotion is always great.
Yeah.
Okay. So next is, I think, Sundari Sakhi Mataji. Would you like to read? Also, meanwhile, if anyone wants to share, they can raise their hand if they have any comment or they want to ask any question. We can move to the next verse if no one is there.
Yes. Text 55, translation. Since the living entity is associated with material nature, he is in an awkward position. But if in the human form of life, he is taught how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee, this position can be overcome. Purport. The word Prakriti means material nature, and Purusha may also refer to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one wants to continue his association with Prakriti, the female energy of Krishna, and be separated from Krishna by the illusion that he is able to enjoy Prakriti, he must continue in his conditional life. If he changes his consciousness, however, and associates with the supreme original person, Purusham Shasvatam, or with his associates, he can get out of the entanglement of material nature. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 4.9, Janma Karma Chame Divyam Evam Yoveti Tatvatah, one must simply understand the Supreme Person, Krishna, in terms of his form, name, activities, and pastimes. This will keep one always in the association of Krishna. Tyaktva deham punarjanma naiti mam eti sorjuna. Thus, after giving up his gross material body, one accepts not another gross body, but a spiritual body in which to return home back to Godhead. Thus, one ends the tribulation caused by his association with the material energy. In summary, the living entity is an eternal servant of God, but he comes to the material world and is bound by material conditions because of his desire to lord it over matter. Liberation means giving up this false consciousness and reviving one's original service to the Lord. This return to one's original life is called mukti, as confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam. Muktir hitvan yatha rupam swarupena vyavasthitihi. So, two points that struck me in this purport. The first one is, I think Prabhupada is talking about association here. If he's saying that in translation, if he's taught how to associate with the Supreme Personality of Godhead or his devotee. So that was the most striking point for me in this purport. The like entire Bhagavatam is like replete with examples of how people's lives have changed because of association. I was just listening to a class recently, and which is why I remember Mrigari's example. He was a hunter who used to take pleasure in half killing animals, but then he meets Narad Muni, and then his life gets changed because of that association. That's one point. And the second point that struck me was the same point that Jitendra Prabhu was mentioning in the first purport. Prabhupada defines mukti as giving up this false consciousness and reviving one's original service to the Lord. That is what his definition of mukti is. Yes.
Yeah, beautiful. Because yeah, it's like a continuation from the previous verse where it's subtle bodies and gross body. And then when you are focusing on subtle body, then how it affects through the gross body when you associate using your gross body with the devotees of the Lord. and then you give up your false consciousness, which is the subtle body, which is mostly attached to subtle body, and reviving one's own nature. Thank you, Mataji. So now this was from the last class. So now we will start from text 56, which is mostly the story of Ajamil. I remember Gorang Prabhu mentioning that once he was giving a lecture, and one he asked people, he was mentioning about Mahajans, and a college student, he raised his hand and he was asking, who's your favorite Mahajan? He said, my favorite Mahajan is Ajamil. And Gaurang Prabhu said, why is that? And he said that because wo maja bhi kiya aur Bhagavad Dham bhi gaya. So he enjoyed and went to the Lord's abode as well. And Gaurang Prabhu says that, he might be an exception, but you might not make it. So better be careful. So now when we read about Ajamil, it makes us remind of how strong the material energy is, how strong Maya is, working 24/7, 365 days, and almost 311 trillion years of the entire lifetime of Lord Brahma. So all of us can be tested, and we should not take anything for granted. So just to keep that, just to mention that. Now we can begin reading this. Nupur, would you like to go?
Yes. Translation. In the beginning, this Brahmana named Ajamil studied all the Vedic literatures. He was a reservoir of good character, good conduct, and good qualities. Firmly established in executing all the Vedic injunctions, he was very mild and gentle. He kept his mind and senses under control. Furthermore, he was always truthful. He knew how to chant the Vedic mantras, and he was also very pure. Ajamil was very respectful to his spiritual master, the fire god, guests, and elderly members of his household. Indeed, he was free from false prestige. He was upright, benevolent to all living entities, and well behaved. He would never speak nonsense or envy anyone. Purport. The order carriers of Yamraj, the Yamdut, are explaining the factual position of piety and impiety and how a living entity is entangled in this material world. Describing the history of Ajamira's life, the Yamduts relate that in the beginning he was a learned scholar of the Vedic literature. He was well behaved, neat and clean, and very kind to everyone. In fact, he had all good qualities. In other words, he was like a perfect Brahmana. A Brahmana is expected to be perfectly pious, to follow all the regulative principles, and to have all good qualities. The symptoms of piety are explained in these verses. Srila Vigra Ghava Acharya comments that Dhritam Vritam Stri Sangrahitya Atmak Brahmacharya Rupam. In other words, Ajamil followed the rules and regulations of celibacy as the perfect brahmachari and was very soft hearted, truth, clean, and pure. How he fell down in spite of all these qualities and thus came to be threatened with the punishment by Yamraj will be described in the following verses.
Like to make a comment?
Yes, like I was going through Srila Prabhupada's lecture transcript. And in this, like he said that here, through the example of Ajamil, like we are being told, like although he had forgotten Narayan, but on account of chanting the holy name of Narayan, although he meant his son, it was effective. So Srila Prabhupada is saying that we have to understand like this only. Somehow or the other, if we chant the holy names knowingly or unknowingly, it will have its effect. And the example he gives, like just like you touch the fire knowingly or unknowingly, you will get burned. So similarly, if you chant Hare Krishna Mahamantra knowingly or unknowingly, it will be effective on our lives.
Mhm. Yeah, so far the Yamdutas were just stating some heavy facts about this material world, and now they have begun explaining about the history of Ajamil to the Vishnu Dutas. And yeah, no matter, it's like uh, the holy name coming to our rescue, as Prabhupada is mentioning. Thank you for sharing that. So next again, I think Jitendra Prabhu.
Yep. Let me see. Okay. Text 58 to 60.
Yes, Prabhu.
Once this Brahmana, Ajamil, following the order of his father, went to the forest to collect fruit, flowers, and two kinds of grass called Samit and Kusha. On the way home, he came upon a Shudra, a very lusty fourth class man, who was shamelessly embracing and kissing a prostitute. The Shudra was smiling, singing, and enjoying as if this were proper behavior. Both the Shudra and the prostitute were drunk. The prostitute's eyes were rolling in intoxication, and her dress had become loose. Such was the condition in which Ajamil saw them. Purport. While traveling along the public way, Ajamil came upon a fourth class man and a prostitute, who are vividly described here. Drunkenness was sometimes manifest even in bygone ages, although not very frequently. In this age of Kali, however, such sin is to be seen everywhere, for people all over the world have become shameless. Long ago, when he saw the scene of the drunken Shudra and the prostitute, Ajamil, who was a perfect brahmachari, was affected. Nowadays, such sin is visible in so many places, and we must consider the position of a brahmachari student who sees such behavior. For such a brahmachari to remain steady is very difficult unless he is extremely strong in following the regulative principles. Nevertheless, if one takes to Krishna consciousness very seriously, he can withstand the provocation created by sin. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we prohibit illicit sex, intoxication, meat eating, and gambling. In Kali Yuga, a drunk, half naked woman embracing a drunk man is a very common sight, especially in the Western countries. And restraining oneself after seeing such things is very difficult. Nevertheless, if by the grace of Krishna one adheres to the regulative principles and chants the Hare Krishna mantra, Krishna will certainly protect him. Indeed, Krishna says that his devotee is never vanquished. Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhakta pranashyati. Therefore, all the disciples practicing Krishna consciousness should obediently follow the regulative principles and remain fixed in chanting the holy name of the Lord. Then there need be no fear. Otherwise, one's position is very dangerous, especially in this Kali Yuga.
Hmm. How does that make you feel, Jitendra Prabhu, reading in New York City?
Nah, so many devotees told me such things when I was going to come to the US. One devotee, right on the day when I had my flight, I think I shared with some of you before. On the day I had my flight, he was sitting with me and convincing me not to go to the US. So yeah, there is fear, and in fact, one of Prabhupada's godbrothers once said that you disciples of Prabhupada, he was referring to them. You guys don't have enough fear of Maya. So the lesson is that these things that can entice us are there all around us, and we need to have a healthy fear of Maya and try to. One thing is to avoid them, but more importantly, we need to, as Prabhupada said, engage ourselves in chanting of the holy names. So, following four regulative principles will bring us to a human platform. And from there, we have to elevate ourselves to the spiritual platform. And that happens with the chanting of the holy names of the Lord. So, yeah, definitely in Kali Yuga, the lives that the youth especially live, including me, that I had lived before, was very degraded, and it's not something that a decent person would be doing, right? So just like what Prabhupada writes here, the scene of a man embracing a woman is very common, especially in the Western countries, right? And even in India, even in the Eastern countries, even though it's not so visible, sometimes the mind tricks us into, with the click of a button, the mind tricks us into looking at such sites. So this is very unfortunate, and those who got introduced to Krishna consciousness, including me, I really feel very lucky to have been, ripped out from that lifestyle to come here. And yeah, so of course, New York, Western countries, it's dangerous in one way, but then this is also where Prabhupada wanted to plant the seed of bhakti. So as a service to Prabhupada, if we can live here, then definitely that is yeah. If we can please Prabhupada, if we can please our Guru, and if we can please Krishna, then these things won't affect us. It will be like the lotus flower, right? It is given the analogy. The lotus flower, although it's in dirty water, sometimes it doesn't get affected by that. Right? So
Yeah.
similarly, we have to be in the material world, but we don't have to be of the material world. So we can be in New York, but we don't have to be of New York. I guess. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that, bro. I also heard, so thanks to Srila Prabhupada and Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, that we are being so fortunate that we are getting the holy name. We are getting this opportunity to chant, to associate with devotees, and to at least know what Krishna consciousness is. And as the time is going ahead, and as we can read in the purport already, so in such times, there are some even more lenient ways. As recently Gaurang Prabhu was mentioning that as further the age will progress, 16 rounds might even sound too much also. So as we are adopting very lenient ways to connect with lots of people, so it's like a Krishna consciousness university where everyone is given a chance to enroll and apply and get into the university. But it comes down to us individually, that if we want to graduate or not, because that is not compromised. That still requires all our effort, intensity in our sadhana, intensity in our service, and with pure intentions, of course, taking care of our needs also.
Yeah.
So that effort is very much required individually, because once we have enrolled, but graduation is something we have to do it ourselves.
True. True.
Yeah,
Definitely, Prabhu.
yeah. So we can move to the next verse, Likha Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu. The Shudra, his arm decorated with turmeric powder, was embracing the prostitute. When Ajamila saw her, the dormant lusty desires in his heart awakened, and in illusion he fell under their control. Purport. It is said that if one's body is smeared with turmeric, it attracts the lusty desires of the opposite sex. The word Kamaliptena indicates that the Shudra was decorated with turmeric smeared on his body.
Mm,
Um, I just wanted to reflect on the verses that was read by Jitendra Prabhu and by
yeah.
Nupur Mataji earlier. Um, when Mataji read the characteristics of Ajamila when he was a Brahmana, those are like uh, very noble qualities. Those are, if anyone possesses those qualities, then they are considered to be extremely elevated, on the
Mhm.
right path. Like, so someone of that caliber, um by just interacting with one scene can, basically it's very scary, like Jitendra Prabhu was telling. It's really scary. And when we're all like going with the flow, like whatever, wherever our life takes us, it's very easy to blend in easily. But until and unless we read or hear from these holy scriptures, we will not even know that we are in deep trouble. So, like Jitendra Prabhu was reflecting, it's we are all very lucky to be in this framework.
Mm.
um yeah, I just wanted to reflect on
Yeah, because if someone is having all these good qualities and
that. Yeah.
also, and what if they also, like a Jamil, they also
Yeah.
like fall down, or even us, we might have
Yeah.
these qualities also. So it is quite bewildering and quite reminding us to be always alert and take shelter.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, thank you. And on this verse, I just want to, I just heard that whatever we see and hear, that really impacts our
Hmm.
thoughts. So if one has to control like lusty desire, then it really matters on what we see and hear.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's very true.
yeah. We can move to the next verse now. Unless someone has, you can always raise your hand if you want to comment or just ask any question anytime. So yeah, we can move to the next verse. Sundari Saki Mataji.
Yes. Text 62, translation. As far as possible, he patiently tried to remember the instructions of the Shastras, not even to see a woman. With the help of this knowledge and his intellect, he tried to control his lusty desires, but because of the force of Cupid within his heart, he failed to control his mind. Purport. Unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, and proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. Thus, after seeing a man embracing a young woman and practically doing everything required for sex life, even a fully qualified Brahmana, as described above, could not control his lusty desires and restrain himself from pursuing them. Because of the force of materialistic life, to maintain self control is extremely difficult unless one is specifically under the protection of the Supreme Personality of Godhead through devotional service.
Mm.
I actually have a question here. So, like we've read in Bhagavad Gita, right, that the intellect is stronger than the mind, is supposed to be stronger than the mind. But so here we see that he did try to use his intellect. He had knowledge, he tried to use his intellect, but still the senses were so powerful, the mind was so powerful that he could not control it. So basically, yeah, how what is the process of like actually making the intellect strong enough to uh, control the mind?
Mm. I don't know. I can just think of maybe through devotional service develop that higher taste, and so that the soul is satisfied, and ultimately it's about the soul that is getting satisfaction and the highest taste in devotional service, until it is the intelligent mind and the senses are still able to control. So I feel, yeah,
Yeah.
his intelligence was not that strong. As Prabhupada also says, that unless one is very strong in knowledge, patience, proper bodily, mental, and intellectual behavior, controlling one's lusty desires is extremely difficult. It seems like his intelligence was not that much so strong, or as soon as the seed got water, it just nurtured. Yeah, but these are my thoughts. Maybe
Yeah.
anyone else, we would love to hear. Jitendra Prabhu, Gaur Kumar Prabhu, or Giridhari Prabhu, Vinay Prabhu, Lekha Mataji, Dhaval Prabhu, anyone, it's open.
Hare Krishna Prabhu, can I say something on this verse?
Of course, yes, Prabhu.
Haribol. Haribol Prabhu. So I was reading this verse from Chaitanya Charitamrit. दूषित दूषित अन्न खाइले मलिन है मन, मलिन मन कैसे करे कृष्णेर स्मरण. So this verse talks about like if you eat like food cooked by contaminated food, or the food cooked by uh, non-devotees, or like food cooked in a impure way, not offered to Krishna, that will pollute your heart, and then because of that you cannot remember Krishna, or your consciousness cannot remain steady in Krishna. In the similar way, the food word here is, it refers to like the food for all the organs or all the senses. Like eyes have their food, we look at something. Tongue has, of course, the prasadam food, and then touch, all our senses. Ears have their food. So if all these organs are fed with the impure food, or they have the impure intake, then that way we won't be able to remember Krishna, because our intelligence gets polluted, our hearts get polluted. So I think this answers Mataji's question somewhere, that what we can practically do is like trying to prevent very carefully what we feed to our tongue, what we feed to our ears, eyes, and that way we can be steady in our Krishna consciousness. Yeah.
Yeah, but for because we read that he was such a nice Brahmana, he was following everything so nicely. Still, he just with this one side, he was still got bewildered or agitated. Yes, Jitendra Prabhu, please go ahead.
Sorry. So um, this intelligence is higher than the mind and the senses. But then Krishna also says in the Gita, Indriyani manobuddhir asyadhisthana muchyate. So the sitting places of lust. So the lust is not just seated in the senses or the mind. The lust is seated in the senses, the mind, as well as the intelligence. So that is one thing. And another thing which I don't know if it's there in the verse. Let me check. Uh, so one thing that Ajamil could have done, and we have that facility to do. So it is said that he tried his best. He tried his best not to fall for this, but then there is a. Does it say that he sought counsel of somebody who was advanced in spiritual life?
No.
Because that is one thing, one facility that we have today. So even though we might be exposed to certain stimuli, the association of devotees, which is what I mean by seeking counsel, would have helped definitely, because ultimately it's like our desires are like mountains, our lust is like a mountain, and to scale that mountain sometimes we only us doing that is not enough. We need help. We need Krishna's help maybe. And Maharaj also says this many times. So one in I was hearing a clip where he asks devotees who are seated in the audience, so when can you control desires? Then devotees tried to answer and all that. Then Maharaj said, you cannot control desires, something like that. You cannot do that. You cannot put a stop to your desires. The only way you can conquer lust is when Krishna conquers it for you. So it's not really our capacity to do that in one way. Of course, that does not mean we don't try. We try to show Krishna that we sincerely want to conquer it, and then Krishna will come and conquer it for us. So like that. So it's
Yeah,
more of the grace that comes from Krishna, which conquers the lust and the lower tendencies that we have.
yeah. It reminds me of Ravana being the personification of lust, and no one could conquer him. Only Lord Ram could do that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Gorkon Prabhu, please, if you want to share.
Yeah, Hare Krishna. First of all, thank you for this question, Mataji. Very relevant question. So I just have a couple of thoughts here. So there is a subtle difference between strong intelligence and weak intelligence. So strong intelligence is when we always think of long-term consequences, and weak intelligence is when we get carried away by the heat of the moment, which is what happened in this particular case. He was intelligent, he was trying to use his intellect, but it was weak intellect because he was not thinking of long-term consequences. So I feel that that is the key here. If we have to develop strong intelligence, we have to always look at long-term consequences, because the mind, what happens is it's very restless. It's always looking for hopes of pleasure, or it's always looking for fears of trouble. These are the only two things that it always keeps doing. It always keeps hoping for pleasure, or we are fearful of troubles. And then if the intellect is weak, it immediately goes along with the mind. But if we keep thinking long term, and in fact, if you extend this analogy a little bit, and if you think long term in terms of eternity, then these small things don't even bother us. So we must eventually get to this kind of strong intelligence where we always consider long term consequences. Just wanted to mention this. I hope this helps, Madhu. Thank you.
All of these answers were like so good, so many different perspectives. Thank you.
Thank you, Mataji, for asking it. Thank you, everyone. Yeah, can move to the next verse. Nupur, you can go.
Yes. Text 63 translation. In the same way that the sun and moon are eclipsed by a low planet, the Brahmana lost all his good sense. Taking advantage of the situation, he always thought of the prostitute, and within a short time he took her as a servant in his house and abandoned all the regulative principles of Brahmana. Purport. By speaking this verse, Shukdev Goswami wants to impress upon the mind of the reader that Ajamil's exalted position as the Brahmana was vanquished by his association with the prostitute so much that he forgot all his Brahmanical activities. Nevertheless, at the end of his life, by chanting the 4 syllables of the name Narayan, he was saved from the gravest danger of falling down. Swalpamapasya dharmasya trayate mehato bhayat. So, even a little devotional service can save one from the greatest danger. Devotional service, which begins with chanting of the holy name of the Lord, is so powerful that even if one falls down from the exalted position of a Brahmin, through sexual indulgence, he can be saved from all the calamities if he somehow or other chants the holy name of the Lord. This is the extraordinary power of the Lord's holy name. Therefore, in Bhagavad Gita, it is advised that one not forget the chanting of the holy name even for a moment. Satatam kirtayanto mam yatantscha dridvrata. So there are so many dangers in this material world that one may fall down from an exalted position at any time. Yet, if one keeps himself pure and steady by chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra, he will safe. He'll be safe without a doubt.
Yeah.
So, yes. So here, like by the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada is telling about like there are so many dangers. So in his lecture, he said like elaborating on this point that there will be padam padam yad vipadam. So our motive of life should be like how do we get out of this dangerous these dangerous positions? How to get out of it should be the aim, and not becoming more and more implicated. Like this won't be the intelligence. He also like as the discussion was going on, like he calls this calm lusty desire a heart disease. So Ajamil was infected by this heart disease only by seeing it. Like this is nature. The nature's law is so perfect that only by seeing one will be infected. So we are put into such a position every moment, like being affected by the 3 modes of material nature. The nature is working so perfectly. So our business of human life is to protect ourselves from this infection of material nature, and how it can be done. It's like given in this purport, like we can chant the holy names. We should chant the holy names every time, and one should not forget it as it is like as Prabhupada is telling us in this purport. Also, like in his lecture, Prabhupada highlighted the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. So Ajamil, he was a Brahmana. Undoubtedly, like he fell to a victim to Maya. But again, at the same time, the story of Srila Haridas Thakur, he was a young man at that time, and he too was instigated by a prostitute, young prostitute, and she was unable to do that. So even the prostitute became a Vaishnavi. So this is the difference between a devotee and a non-devotee. Like Srila Prabhupada is saying that a known devotee cannot surpass the stringent laws of material nature, but a devotee can, because a devotee is not affected by the influence of material nature.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, this purport is on the same lines as everyone previously mentioned, that how we are serving the food to our eyes and the senses, and how the lust is having his abode till the level of intelligence also, and how much we are nourishing it, just giving up in the heat of the moment, or having that weak intelligence, or thinking of the long term, and nourishing the intelligence in the soul with the holy name or devotional service of the Lord, and taking the shelter of the Lord, we can be protected. Yeah, thank you for sharing your thoughts. So next we'll move again to Jitendra Prabhu, text 64.
Um, the Sajam. Oh Krishna. Just one. On my guide.
I can read, Prabhu,
Thus,
if you're holding Pitu.
no, it's okay. I'll softly read. Thus, Ajamil began spending whatever money he had inherited from his father to satisfy the prostitute with various material presentations, so that she would remain pleased with him. He gave up all his Brahminical activities to satisfy the prostitute. Purport. There are many instances throughout the world in which even a purified person being attracted by a prostitute spends all the money he has inherited. Prostitute hunting is so abominable that the desire for sex with a prostitute can ruin one's character, destroy one's exalted position, and plunder all one's money. Therefore, illicit sex is strictly prohibited. One should be satisfied with his married wife, for even a slight deviation will create havoc. A Krishna conscious Grihastha should always remember this. He should always be satisfied with one wife and be peaceful simply by chanting the Hare Krishna mantra. Otherwise, at any moment, he may fall down from his good position, as exemplified in the case of Ajamil. Yeah,
Mm,
so nothing much to share here, but a huge word of caution on a practical level for all the current grihasthas and aspiring grihasthas. Um, yeah, that's
yeah.
pretty much what I can think of.
Yeah, even if one is married, then we can't take it for granted. We still have to
Yeah,
be
yeah.
careful. Yeah, thank you, bro. So, Lekha Mataji.
Yes, Prabhu. Um, Text 65. Because his intelligence was pierced by the lustful glance of the prostitute, the victimized Brahmana Ajamil engaged in sinful acts in her association. He even gave up the company of his very beautiful young wife, who came from a very respectable Brahmana family. Purport. Customarily, everyone is eligible to inherit his father's property, and Ajamila also inherited the money of his father. But what did he do with the money? Instead of engaging the money in the service of Krishna, he engaged it in the service of a prostitute. Therefore, he was condemned and was punishable by Yamraj. How did this happen? He was victimized by the dangerous, lustful glance of a prostitute. Yes, Prabhu, I think this is very clear message on the association that we have, um, the people, what we see, what we eat. I think it's very evident, and it's very subtle, but it's very impactful. So it's a very good message
Mm.
for us to always be reminded about it.
Yeah, and even though we are so fortunate sometimes to have great wealth and money, and if it is not
Hmm.
used in the service of the Lord, then it just we are serving the material energy and we usually fall down.
Yeah, yeah, well said.
Yeah, okay. So, Sundari Saki Mataji.
Text 66. Um, Although born of a Brahmana family, this rascal, bereft of intelligence because of the prostitutes' association, earned money somehow or other, regardless of whether properly or improperly, and used it to maintain the prostitutes' sons and daughters.
You can read the next one also.
Okay. Text 67. This Brahmana irresponsibly spent his long lifetime transgressing all the rules and regulations of the holy scripture, living extravagantly and eating food prepared by a prostitute. Therefore, he is full of sins. He is unclean and addicted to forbidden activities. Purport: food prepared by an unclean, sinful man or woman, especially a prostitute, is extremely infectious. Ajamila ate such food, and therefore he was subject to be punished by Yamaraj. Reminds me of what Vamsidhar Gopal Prabhu was speaking about, being very careful of the food that you consume.
Yeah.
It's a lot of places we hear this, that a person's consciousness goes in the food that is being prepared. So you have to be very careful.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. So last, Nupur, the last verse for this chapter and today.
Translation. This man Ajamil did not undergo atonement. Therefore, because of his sinful life, we must take him into the presence of Yamraj for punishment. There, according to the extent of his sinful acts, he will be punished and thus purified. Purport: the Vishnu Doots had forbidden the Yamdoots to take Ajamil to Yamraj, and therefore the Yamdoots explained that taking such a man to Yamraj was appropriate. Since Ajamil had not undergone atonement for his sinful acts, he was to be taken to Yamraj to be purified. When a man commits murder, he becomes sinful and therefore he also must be killed. Otherwise, after death, he must suffer many sinful reactions. Similarly, punishment by Yamraj is a process of purification for the most abominable sinful persons. Therefore, the Yamdoots requested the Vishnu Doot not to obstruct their taking Ajamil to Yamraj.
Yeah. Any thoughts you want to share?
No.
Okay. Yeah, so this concludes this chapter where the Yamdutas are telling the Vishnudata that, do not obstruct because this is all that this person has done. And this is the extent of his sinful acts. So he needs to be punished to so that he can be purified because he didn't perform the acts for atonement. So today we discussed how through the life of Ajamil that even though with so many good qualities, still there is danger at every step in this world, and how cautious we can be with what we are seeing, what we are hearing, the food that we are providing to the senses, and how something which is especially lust that reside till the intelligence, as Chaitanya Prabhu shared, and it's to kill Ravana we need Lord Ram. So to conquer the desires, such anarthas, we need Krishna to sit in our heart, and to have an heart where Krishna can come and stay. We need to take up to devotional service. We need to uh, be sincere and have intensity in our sadhana as our personal uh, service, as our personal journey towards the Lord's lotus feet. And yeah, that's all I have. And it's open for everyone to share their comments or whatever they want to take away from today's discussion. Yeah. Yes, Madhuri, please.
I just remember in the Harry Potter movies, I'm a huge fan of Harry Potter. There's one professor, Mad-Eye Moody, and he's shouting this sentence, these words, constant vigilance, constant vigilance. So that is something that was key takeaway from this entire part that we read today. He had everything going good for him, Ajamil. He had intelligence, he had Brahmanical qualities, but one small slip and it can really, so like constant vigilance against Maya and just being in the association of devotees. Yeah, that's my takeaway.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. Anyone else? You can unmute and speak. And yeah, also we have lots of sign-ups still left for the next Wednesdays. So please feel free to sign up as a leader for the discussion and also as a reader for the discussion.
I just wanted to welcome Giridhari Prabhu, who's joined us for the first time. Thank you so much, Giridhari Prabhu, joining us from Dallas. And Giridhari Prabhu is the brother of Sundari Saki Mataji. Thank you, Prabhu, for taking the time and being with us. Do you want to share anything, Prabhu? Or
thank you, Prabhu, so much for allowing me to join this spiritual discussion where everybody is coming together to read Srimad Bhagavatam. I just had a small point, Prabhu, like about the entire Ajamil story was that like many times we feel that maybe after spending certain years in Krishna consciousness, that I have reached this and this level, or I have finished my bhakti shastri, or I have become initiated. But we never truly are safe in this material world. We can get struck by Maya anytime, and we truly have to continuously be aware that we are in hostile territory. So yeah.
wonderful. Thank you so much, Giridhari Prabhu. And thank you all for joining us. I just wanted to mention one thing that I heard from Govind Prabhu's class yesterday, and I also had a long discussion with Chaitanya Charan Prabhu on this point. So yes, it is very important to chant the holy names. Yes, it is very important to not commit aparadh. And yes, it is very important to associate with devotees. So all these things will help us grow in our spiritual lives, no doubt, no doubt. But On the other hand, if for some reason we become despondent or some failures happen in our lives or some other thoughts come, immediately if you go to a devotee, they'll say that maybe you're committing some aparad, maybe you're committing some aparad towards chanting the holy names or something like that. But it need not always be that. That despondency or anything that comes has to be addressed at the immediate level as well. So Govind Prabhu clearly mentions, since yesterday was Dasera, he gave two examples from the Ramayana. So one was Hanuman himself. So Hanuman crossed over the Lanka and he crossed over the ocean and reached Lanka. And then he went into the palace and tried to look for Mother Sita, and he could not find her. Even after searching every nook and corner of the palace, he could not find her. At that point, he became extremely despondent. He became extremely depressed to such an extent that he thought of fasting till death or committing suicide, because he felt that if he goes back empty handed to meet Lord Ram, and if Lord Ram sees him empty handed, Lord Ram would be devastated. And then because of that, Lord Ram would give up his, this is all his speculation, that Lord Ram would give up his body, then Lakshmana would give up his body, and then Bharat, when he hears that, he'll also give up his body. So he thought that because of all this, he should just give up his body. So here at this point, had he committed any aparadh? No, he had not committed any aparadh. Had he committed any mistakes? He was always chanting the Lord's name. He was completely in the mood of service. But there are two different things here. So one is, on the spiritual side, yes, definitely chanting the holy names properly will help us. But on the material side, or when we are assigned some task and we are feeling despondent, it could be because of some other reasons as well. So please do not attach spiritual things to your material despondencies or thoughts or anything all the time, because that can become a problem. So I just wanted to share this. And then because of this, after Hanuman actually again started using his intelligence, he got the intelligence to actually go and search in other places outside the palace. And that's when he went and found Mother Sita there. So this was a clear test, or also a clear example for us, that we have to understand that sometimes, even as practicing devotees, as Giridhari Prabhu also mentioned, that after several years also, we could get despondent, we could, but there could be other factors as well. There could be other factors as well. So please don't always attach it to not chanting properly or committing aparadh or things like that. Just wanted to mention this.
Yeah, thank you, bro. Amazing point.
So with that, I think we can end. And as Vishal Prabhu mentioned, we're still looking for some other devotees to sign up. So if you can please sign up on that link, I'll post it on the group, and then it'll be really helpful to have more leaders and readers. And any feedback, we have about 10 minutes left. Any feedback on how it is going so far? I can stop the recording.